It's 10:50 and time to say hello and welcome. Welcome to Section 1A, Planning Analysis. I'm Dr. Judy Farvolden, Executive Director of the University of Toronto's Transportation Research Institute, and I will be moderating this session, which mostly means keeping the session on time so that each of our excellent speakers has an opportunity to present. Our speakers in this session come from Canada, Brazil, Denmark, and Israel. We'll share their insights about how big data from smart cards, GPS, and a variety of automatic counters and location devices has been used to understand clients, used for bus lane allocation and strategic planning, used to measure accessibility, and to measure the impact of service disruptions. I have just a few housekeeping remarks. Some of these presentations are already available from the links on the final program on the Union Home Hub website, and others will be available after the presentation. We encourage all the presenters to post and for you to consult with these resources. And so given the time constraints, we won't have any Q&A during the lightning presentations, very short 6-minute presentations. However, there is a Google Drive Q&A document posted at the schedule of the conference. And we invite you and encourage you, please, to post questions on this Q&A document. There's a tab for each of the speakers for you to post. And if we have time at the end, we'll consult with these questions and try to get some of them answered in this time. And otherwise, I believe there'll be some follow-up. The session is being recorded. The Q&A box, the chat box, the Zoom chat, is only for technical assistance if you need it. We won't be looking for questions in the chat box. Okay, so now I can welcome Anna Dushina to unmute and to share her screen and begin her presentation.
Hello, everybody.
Here comes Anna. I'm going to just give her confirmation that we see her and we hear her and we see her presentation.
Okay, do you see it?
Here it comes. And Anna, take it away, please. Thank you.
Thank you. So first of all, thank you everybody for attending, and a huge thanks to the organizers for making it all possible at this difficult time. So my name is Anna Dushina and I work at Société de Transport de Laval. And today I'll talk to you about an unsupervised machine learning project that we conducted recently, and it's using smart card transaction data. So first of all, wait a second, I cannot, how to switch slides? Oh, there we go. So first of all, who are we? STL is a transit agency in Laval, Quebec, Canada. We operate 46 bus routes along with some other services, and it all adds up to about 20 million bus trips per year, just to give you a sense of scope. And the questions we're asking ourselves very often are, who are our clients? Can we understand their travel behavior better? Who is affected by our planning decisions and how? And a whole new question this year is obviously, which ones of our clients are affected by COVID-19 and to what degree? So one of the ways to answer these questions is to conduct a customer segmentation study and to see all the different types of people that use our services and all the different ways in which they do it. So when you do a customer segmentation study, you have a choice. You can use customer service information, or you can rely on smart card transaction data. And customer surveys are great. So you can ask a person what he or she does for a living, where they live, where do they go, what is their attitude towards using transit. But all of this information is self-reported. So as you might know, sometimes there's a difference between what we do and what we say we do. So it might be a bit less reliable in that sense, whereas the smart card transaction data is the actual observed travel behavior of users. So that's the way that we chose for our project. And smart card data is actually a super rich source of information. And we've spent a lot of time and effort at SEL building a complete database of smart card transactions. It all goes back to 2014, and it's about 90% of all of our ridership, the rest being cash transactions and single-use cards. So for every single transaction, we have exact date, time, location, type of transaction, and all sorts of other information. And I should also say that it's continuous. So I don't just know how many trips a given client has made in January, and then maybe if I'm lucky in June, I can actually observe how the travel patterns change from one week to the next. What was it like last month, last year? And it's all incredibly handy when you're trying to analyze travel behavior. But when I say I can follow it over time, I can't actually follow a client because I don't know who the smart card belongs to. What I do have is a unique, anonymized, constant ID client in my database. So using that, I can see all the transactions that were made by one and the same client. Another information that I have in my database is the fare type, and that was very useful for the first step of our customer segmentation study, because using that we could see, we could identify 5 key profiles of our clients. So the students 12 to 17 years old, older students, adults, the elderly, or other. And then for each one of those key profiles, we went on to select the features for the segmentation process. For example, the average number of weekly trips per client per month, the percentage of peak versus off-peak trips, the percentage of local versus regional trips, the number of months since the very first transaction by this client on our network, and other features. And then we went on to conduct k-means clustering. And as many of you will sure know, you cannot just do it once and then it's all going to be perfect. We analyzed the results, saw what things made sense and which ones didn't. And then, you have to take a step or two back, maybe tweak your feature selection, and then run the k-means segmentation until you're happy with the results and until they speak to you. So we used 1 year of data for clustering, which means it was done for over 170,000 clients. And actually it was done by month client. That means that one and the same client could change a cluster depending on his travel patterns from 1 month to the next, which we find is very useful for tracking changes in behavior. And it was done for 23 million trips because we had information not only for our buses, but also for the Montreal subway system, which is very useful when you analyze regional trips. And then we used another 2 years of data to validate the robustness of our results, and we were satisfied with that. And that allowed us to go from 5 key profiles that I've talked about to 18 distinct personas. So that's a whole lot more nuance to it. As an example here, it's very simple. So we were able to go from an abstract elderly user profile to identifying 2 distinct clusters. The majority of our elderly users are very occasional, and they make maybe 2 to 3 trips per week on average. But there is a 20% who are very active, very loyal, and are very regular users for us. So right before COVID struck, we were busy integrating these results in our database and basically attributing each and every transaction to a distinct persona. And we're hoping to continue this fall.
1 minute.
Analyze how did COVID-19 impact all the different clusters of our clients. But we're looking forward to developing all sorts of dashboards to help us gain better insights into travel patterns. We can design targeted marketing campaigns. So if you want to target a particular persona, you can see on the map by time of day where you can find these people to talk to them, or do all sorts of other ridership analysis. So that's it for me. Thank you very much.
Well done. Well done, well done. Thank you very much, Anna. And now I'd like to invite Renato to share his screen.
Sure.
I think you can just grab that. Here he comes.
Okay.
It's very black. I don't see a presentation yet. There we are. Yes, you're on. Good
Yeah.
to go. Thank you very much, Renato. Take it away.
Okay. Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Renato Arbex and I work at São Paulo Transportes, which is the transit agency responsible for planning and management of the bus system in São Paulo, Brazil. I'm going to present the work entitled Public Transport Accessibility Changes Over Time and Space. So before the pandemic, SPTrans had about 8.6 million boardings on buses on weekdays. We manage more than 1,300 bus lines and 14,000 buses, making 200,000 scheduled trips per weekday. The objective of this study is to propose a methodology framework that enables a continuous measurement of accessibility to jobs to evaluate and better understand the combined effects of network system changes. As we know, transit systems are dynamic, and changes such as different bus speeds, modified service frequencies, infrastructure addition such as new metro lines and new bus lines happen from time to time. We often evaluate the effects of specific modifications using before and after analysis, but still don't quite understand how those continuous and simultaneous modifications affect job accessibility over time and space. The methodology starts with data input from daily GTFS and AVL data. We then process this data to calculate hourly speed profiles for every stop-to-stop segment in the network. We use this new processed speed dataset to update GTFS travel time for each segment. With the updated GTFS, we process travel time matrix calculations for each period using OpenTree Planner. The travel time matrix are then used to calculate accessibility to jobs for each region, considering gravity-based and cumulative opportunities metrics on a hex grid spatial unit. We use the data from June 17 to June 2020. The job spatial distribution dataset had to be fixed, as it is released with a 2-year delay, therefore it is hard to account for the recent changes due to the pandemic. We calculated accessibility for 14 representative workdays spread in the period of analysis. We do plan to further increase the temporal resolution. The first resulting slide shows the relative change in citywide average accessibility to jobs. At first, we calculated the baseline for this, which considers the average of accessibility from August to November 2019. We can see that for the first 3 periods there's a small reduction, then the baseline itself, then a large peak in January 2020 due to vacations, and then a large raise after the quarantine. So what actually happened and what is causing this? We can see that while during the pandemic we had an initial temporary reduction of bus departures and frequencies, there was a significant gain regarding speeds. As frequencies went back to almost normal in June, the last period analyzed boosted in accessibility. This slide shows the distribution of this effect by city districts, split by Human Development Index. As we can see, benefits due to increased speeds were much higher for lower index with plus 48% increase and medium index districts with a plus 40% increase. The spatial distribution will show why this occurred. Comparing June to March 2020, accessibility indexes increased citywide. We can see from this map that most central areas had only a small accessibility increase, up to 15 to 25% in the yellow regions, while those regions located further away benefited the most, as the distance to rail-based transportation infrastructure is much higher. We can see clearly that areas that rely mostly on bus lines running on mixed traffic and also on congested highways had more than double job accessibility, as we can see Raposo Tavares region here, for example, and Anhanguera region here. So this is an ongoing work, and the lessons learned so far include that higher speeds are benefiting lower income population the most, with higher gains on travel time reductions. This is most likely due to reduced overall road traffic and less time spent at stops.
1 minute.
There are other issues to take into account when measuring accessibility in the pandemic, so we acknowledge that this considers the previous job spatial distribution. Continuously measuring accessibility levels revealed otherwise unknown patterns. In the future, we aim to make an easily accessible interface to monitor those changes on a weekly basis for stakeholders, better isolate and identify changes due to different factors, and also include the effect of time at stops, reductions in job supply, and road traffic. When I conclude my presentation, you can reach me at renato.arbex@sptrans.com.br, and thank you very much.
Renato, thank you very much. It's exceptionally interesting. And let me at this point say welcome to the 75 attendees we have joining our session. Welcome, and I hope you're enjoying yourselves. Now I would like to invite Nils to unmute himself and share his screen. Welcome, Nils.
Yes, thank you. Yes, so my name is Nils, and I'm from Linkoping University. And together with Morten, Jesper, and Otto from the Danish Technical University, DTU, we have been analyzing the impacts of long-term service disruptions on passenger travel behavior. So, of course, long-term service disruptions such as the closure of a rail line due to maintenance work have large effects on travel behavior. And we have found quite few existing studies that looked in detail into the effects on the passenger behaviors. The studies we found looked more on the total passenger volumes only, or if they were looking into individual mobility, they were focusing on or just using small surveys. So the idea here was to instead use a large-scale smart card data set to understand the effects of such a long-term disruption on individual mobility. So the case we have been looking at is a 35-kilometer long commuter train line in the Copenhagen area. And this route has been closed for about 13 weeks in the summer of 2018. And at that time, it has been replaced by buses, which of course took longer travel time for the passengers. And to analyze the effects of this closure due to maintenance, we use a data set from smart cards, which covered the whole region of Copenhagen, and it's containing tap in and tap out data, and that is for each trip we have a tap in and tap out information, except for certain types of commuter passes. And just to get an idea of the overall effect of this closure, here we see the blue line is showing the passenger counts from the rail company for this affected line. And we see that it's a steep decrease during the disrupted phase where the rail line was closed. While if we just take another commuter rail line here for reference, that you can see here, the other line, we see just a small decrease in the summer, which is just a seasonal pattern. And especially we also see that the blue line, so the affected line has really hard to come up to the same level as the reference line here, even long time after the disruption has finished, which could indicate some long-term effects also. So the method we have been using is first defining an analysis period, which we divide into pre-phases, the affected phases when the closure was happening, and post phases after that. And then we filter the data that is relevant, and our main idea here was then to cluster the cards, so the passengers, by their travel behavior in the pre-phase. And we do that using k-means clustering, using the share of active weeks that those users had, and then the active days per active weeks, and the share of trips that has been made during weekends to describe the characteristics of the travelers, quite simple. And this segmentation into clusters allows us then to understand the effects on different groups of passengers that this closure had. And we can both compare statistics before, after, and during the closure, and we can also analyze which passengers have changed the cluster, so they have drastically changed their travel behavior. So to give you just some preliminary results, we are still improving this, but to get an idea what we can get out of this analysis, on the left side here, you have a table with 8 clusters. So this is when you divide the cards into 8 clusters. And then we can analyze the effects on the different clusters. So just to give you one example here is if we pick out cluster 7 and cluster 8, we can see that the number of trips per week is almost the same in the pre-phase for both of these clusters. But we can see that there's quite a difference in the affected phase, which means that in cluster 7, people continue to use the replacement service when the rail line was closed, while in cluster 8, they more avoid those using those buses. And if you look at the characteristics of those clusters, we can see that the main difference, as both of these clusters have quite the same amount of trips in average, the main difference is actually the regularity they make these trips in. So cluster 8 is doing trips more regularly over long term, so they're traveling many weeks, while cluster 7 is more concentrated into specific weeks. So that might be something affecting if people want to use the bus or not. And we can also look into how people are changing between clusters from the pre-phase to the after phase. So for example, looking at cluster 6, which are very active travelers, we can find out if they in the phase after the closure are still frequent travelers or if they have changed their behavior. So to wrap it up, this method of clustering the travelers into different groups allows us then to understand the effects that such a long-term service disruption has on specific groups of travelers. So for each group, we can look into how those travelers changed their behavior during the disruption and also after the disruption. And we also are actually currently looking into the long-term effects then that we can see for each of those groups. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Nils. Everybody's doing such a great job of staying on their time. I here see a concluding slide and I don't even give you a warning. Excellent and exceptionally interesting work. Thank you very much. I want to remind the people listening that we will be taking, with everybody keeping such good time, we will have an opportunity to take questions, and I see some questions have been posted, so please let me encourage you to post questions on the Google document and we will get to some of them and perhaps to your question. I'd like to welcome our next speaker, Anthony from Metrolinx. You can share your screen and unmute yourself. There he is.
Awesome. Hello.
And we hear you. There you go.
Thank you very much. It's really an honor to be here, and thank you all for taking the time to listen. I'm very excited to share some of the work that we've been doing at Metrolinx, the regional transportation operator of the GO Transit system in the Greater Toronto area. So this is really, it was delivered pre-COVID, but now I'm adjusting it to talk a little bit more about our COVID response. So our ridership, you can see clearly has dropped. This is the last 4 years of boarding data on buses. But what I want to talk to you today about is why we need to increase ridership, but also do it in a safe way so we don't have crowding on our buses. And we'll do that using the power of big data, both our fare card systems and our automatic passenger counters. And I'm going to share some unique software tools and data analysis applications to understand the patterns in that data. So taking data that's really hard to digest and understand and interpret it and make wisdom or actionable knowledge out of that. So just a background, our fare card system, the Presto, has a platform called PrestoBI. We can analyze ridership information at a rail station, for example. Here you see Long Branch year-over-year comparison. And the boardings are reported to our senior management now on a daily basis. So they are very in touch with our COVID response. Although this data can be used to track OD pairs for GO Rail, it's quite useful because we do have a tap off. That unfortunately on buses is not so useful because it's analyzed at a fare zone system. So we don't have information at a stop level in most cases. So that's where the APC data, sorry, just quickly, this is our overall ridership map, which you can find on Metrolinx's open data page. We recently launched an open data portal, so excited to share that as well. But the alternative data set is the APC, automatic passenger counters. So what it gives us is a much more rich information source. We can, with look at that data. For example, the bottom left here is the stop level boardings by different GO bus routes. And we're also working on ways to have real-time feeds to link that data to our enterprise geodatabase server and display it in real time so we can see where the buses are and how crowded they are. And this is currently just for internal purposes, but we're working on ways to share that information with customers as well. So what I really wanted to talk about today is how we're using that data to transform it into corporate measures or KPIs that make, to measure service effectiveness. And the measure we chose corporately is the passenger kilometers per hour of revenue service. So it's a mouthful, but essentially what it gives us is a balance between how much service we're operating and how long or how far we're transporting our customers. And it's a simple query we run on the APC server, and we can extract it and put it into a Tableau database or in Excel to analyze. In this graph on the bottom, you see the passenger kilometers per service hour across different routes. So we have 40 different routes, and we can analyze it by peak period or whole day or whole month. So it's a very effective measure, a little more nuanced than something like a revenue cost ratio. This gives us really a direct measure of our service performance. In addition to that, we also track things, just basic information like boardings or operated trips and the boardings per trip. So this is a live dashboard in Tableau, which allows you to see kind of that historic trend for all the GO bus network, and then filter it according to our needs. So giving these tools to to our internal staff to make decisions is really a powerful decision-making tool. Now, in the last few minutes, I just want to dive into something and also acknowledge that Eddie is a co-author on this paper or project, and he developed this software tool. He was a summer student at Metrolinx, but actually did this on his own time. And it's a tool called Transify. So I'd encourage you to reach out to him or ask questions. Transify allows you to deep dive into the information at a granular level. So here you see a different time period. You can filter the data for boardings at different stops, or even compare the cumulative load on different trips and see which trips are exceeding our tolerance for crowding. So this is a really useful on-the-fly tool to take thousands and thousands of rows of data and put it into a visual platform. And we can use this to search any route, anytime. In one of the other nice visuals this tool provides,
1 minute.
Ability to look at stop level data. So this is the boardings and alightings before and after COVID, and you can see where certain stops like Yorkdale, which is a retail stop, decreased substantially more than the York Mills terminal. So in closing, I just wanted to share, we also need to look at the customer experience more broadly, including survey data such as this, which shows the origin location of trips. KPIs need to be customized to suit the purposes or the objectives you're trying to meet. And you need to dive deeply into those rich local level data to understand the patterns of travel. In addition, we're looking at Wi-Fi and GPS and other sources. So this is an example taking customer information, analyzing it to look at those catchments of where our customers are coming from. And finally, in closing, this is the summary. Basically, we want to grow revenue and ridership and do it safely. So using data can provide that insight. We also need to look to deploy our service in an effective manner and ensure we're balancing our costs with our revenues. And KPIs like passenger kilometers per service hour are a great way to do that. And these data also support our broader strategic initiatives, such as our 10-year GO bus strategy, regional fare integration planning, and business cases for new bus infrastructure. So with that, I'd like to thank you and also acknowledge Eddie. You contributed a tremendous amount of work here, so please reach out to Eddie if you have any questions about Transify.
Thank you very much, Anthony. And finally, we'll welcome Shaked, our final speaker, to share his screen and unmute himself. And I'll say again, we're doing very well for time, and I see questions are being posted.
Can you hear me well?
Yes, we hear you and we see your presentation. Go ahead, take a full screen.
Thank you. So my name is Shaked Kaufman-Ofek, and I will be presenting Bottleneck, a visualization tool to analyze data-driven bus lane allocation guidelines. This research was supervised by Professor Noam Praktinsky, Dr. Eran Ben Elia, and Dr. Peter Bach from the Ben-Gurion University of the Negev in Israel. So in 2016, the Israeli Ministry of Transportation published the bus lane allocation guidelines. These guidelines dictate when a road link should be allocated as a bus lane. For example, we can see one of the charts that appear in the book of the Ministry of Transportation. If you look here, so we can see that if a road link carries 25 buses an hour during peak hours and commercial speed is under 14 kilometers per hour, this bus lane is qualified for bus lane allocation. These charts are really informative and really nice, but they don't help us too much when we look into the real world. So our research motivation was to take those bus lane guidelines, allocation guidelines, sorry, and to implement them on a real world use case. We can see in the picture the city of Beersheba, a major city in Israel, and the public transit segment network in this city. A public transit segment is a road link that can start or end at a bus stop or a junction to accommodate changes in passenger counts and bus volume counts. So what we did, we took the bus schedules data from the GTFS protocols published in Israel, the automatic vehicle location records published by the Siri protocol in Israel, and automatic passenger counters, and we generated different metrics for each and every public transit segment. The metrics are bus volumes, passenger volumes, commercial speeds, and bus delays. The bus lane allocation guidelines refer to the combination of bus volumes and commercial speeds, as we've seen before, or passenger volumes and commercial speeds. If a PD segment carries more than a certain amount of passengers or a certain amount of buses, but the speed is too low, it is qualified to have a bus lane allocated to it. We also added the delays data in order to provide a comprehensive picture of the status of the public transit for our intended users. The intended users of our system are public transit planners and data analysts that want to overview the bus lane allocation guidelines for the city. We will now see some screens from the system. The screen we're seeing now is Analyze Metric Distribution screen. In this screen, the user is able to analyze each and every metric separately to view its spatial distribution, temporal distribution, and quantitative distribution. For example, in this screen, the user filtered all the public transit segments that carry buses that drive between 0 and 15 kilometers per hour on average during Sundays at morning peak times. We can also see the distribution of these segments on the map. The user can analyze bus volumes, bus speeds, bus delays, and passenger volumes separately. The next screen allows the user to analyze the interaction between the sets of metrics. For example, we see here a scatter plot where each and every data point is a public transit segment. The user selected to analyze bus volumes and bus speeds. The pinkier the color of the data point is, more buses are driving on that PT segments. The more light blue the color is, it means the buses drive faster. If we had any segments that carry many buses in high speeds, we would have seen them here with a dark blue color, but we have none. Looking at the map, we can see that most of the interesting PT segments are all the pink segments. Those segments can be found in the center of the city on the Rager Boulevard. This is the main boulevard of the city. This tells us that Rager Boulevard has many buses that drive very, very slowly, probably due to congestion. Moving to the left screen of the system, we can see the bus lane allocation. All the green PT segments are the ones that are qualified for bus lane allocation. And not surprisingly, all those can be found, or most of them can be found on Rager Boulevard, the main boulevard of the city. It is interesting to say that when this data was collected in March 2019, a bus lane was actually planned to be executed here on this boulevard. We had a group of experts to review the system and got very high usability scores. Our next step is to produce the data for Tel Aviv, which is a much denser city with 7 times more public transit service.
One minute.
We plan to do some user experience and data processing time improvements, and also publish this tool for public use, so anyone can use it, download the code, download the data, and extend it as they want to. Thank you very much, and we will be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, Shaked, and thank you very much to all of our speakers. I'm sure you agree that that was an interesting and a lot of information to take in a short time. This work really is pioneering work by people who are making use of data to understand travelers and to improve the transit experience. I guess I was struck in the earlier talks about the importance of the continuity of data, not only what kind of data, but the continuity of data to examine trends. Of course, all of these presentations submitted before COVID. And so some of that continuity got hijacked by the pandemic, but at least was able to be monitored so that we can understand what the impacts are. So excellent work there. We heard about data being used for decisions up at the highest level of executive daily decision making, and also made available in open data for public use, and it'll be exciting to see what comes of that. Obviously, in each of these slides, we could see the value of visualizations for users, and it was great to see that even a University of Waterloo student had created a dashboard to display data. So this can be done. I'm sure many people listening had ideas and are eager to see if they have that data, how they could make use of some of this analysis and these tools in their own context. And I hope we have an opportunity to discuss some of that in the questions. So now I think I'm going to invite the speakers to share the video. And with Alice's help, we'll look at the questions and direct to questions, hopefully to each of the speakers. Thank you very much for submitting questions. So Anna. Sorry, let me get to, I need to get over. Oh, there. Okay, finding my tab. Thank you very much. Found my tab. Many questions for our first speaker. It's talking about harnessing smart card data to understand clients better, and I will come back to these questions to you later. A lot of people asking Anna if you can share any of this data, the definition of the personas.
Yeah, I saw that I've picked quite an interest there. So basically, the 18 personas is, like, as I said, there were 2 for the elderly. That was one of the easy ones. That's why I picked it for the presentation. For the adults, I saw that somebody asked whether we could differentiate between different ages of adults. We could not, because our regular fare is available to anybody from 18 to 64 years old. And if they don't qualify for a student fare, that's the one they will use. So we could not be more precise on that. But for the adults, there were 5 segments. If you could imagine a sort of a matrix, regional, local, and then peak of peak. And if we can add like a 3rd dimension on loyal versus occasional. So there was one segment that was occasional. And these were people that were occasionally seen on our buses. And then there were basically regional regular commuters, regional all-time users, the ones that were not only found there during peak times, but also in other times of the day. And then the same thing for the local users, basically. So our most active adult segment was actually people who were mostly using local services. So not so much for the Montreal subway, but mostly our buses. And we found that they were moving at all times of the day, during the weekend as well. The proportion of trips, weekend trips was much higher for them than for the rest of the customers. For the students 12 to 17, there were 4 clusters during the school year, and then we decided to have another 2 clusters for the summer months, because in July and August the travel patterns are really not the same as during the school year. So for the summer vacation, it was very basic. So the active ones versus the ones who find other ways to move around, or maybe they just stay put. And we were like progressing from younger students who were not with us for a very long time versus the ones that were in high school maybe, and they've been using our services for years. Then for the older students, there was 3 segments. And for the other, that's the category that I mentioned, we also had 2 different segments for the other category, also regular versus very occasional. And that was everybody who used the non-descriptive passes. So for example, a single fare regular tariff. So that could be anybody. Anybody can buy just a ticket for $3.50 and use it. So it doesn't give us any information. And if the person just keeps buying on this and using these fares, so we cannot really attribute them to a cluster. So that's it.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to just keep moving along and go to Renato's questions. And I see he's been busy. He's actually answered them. But I'd like to give everybody else the benefit of hearing of this. Renato, I wonder, there's a question about does increasing the accessibility compensate for possibly reducing service headways to improve crowding conditions? So the trade-off between headways and service.
Yeah, this is an interesting question because actually before the pandemic we had very crowded routes. So most routes in those regions, they were already very crowded. And since June, we had made the headways almost the same as before the pandemic. So now we already saw a very significant decrease in those crowding conditions. So this compensation is true now. We do have these benefits. Not before, not when the pandemic started, because we had a very high decrease in service headways, but now it's much better.
Thank you very much. Nils, I'm not seeing a question for you. I don't know if you can check, Nils, on the first tab of the Q&A doc, because several people filed questions under that first tab. And none is addressed to you particularly, but if you see one that looks like you, please let me know.
No, I don't think there's any.
Okay, then I'm going to tab back over to reaching out. Shaked, there's a couple questions for you on this first page. A question about the study and its recommendations. Do you recommend where bus lanes should be allocated?
Yes, so as I presented at the final slide of my presentation, the system does show where the bus lanes should be allocated per the guidelines. I can show it again if there's time.
Okay, and there was a second question, at least a second question for you. That's very short. Is your app available publicly, and how would somebody have access to that?
Yes, so the application is available publicly, and there is a link inside the long presentation. It's currently called Bottleneck. I don't think there's too many apps under that name.
Okay, no.
But there is a link inside the presentation, and it will be upgraded and improved soon. Okay,
and remember the presentations will be posted if they aren't already, and apparently a search will also help you find Bottleneck. Right. Okay, Anthony, a couple questions for you. Can you elaborate on how this work could be used in analyzing the customer experience?
Certainly. I would also like to just draw your attention. There is a second presentation from our customer insights team at Metrolinx. So if you're interested, certainly look them up. But specifically, we use this data in the service planning world to look at where the demand is along the route, looking at different patterns for boardings and alightings, and cross-sectionally looking at that different time periods. So for example, on the bus, we carry substantially more students than our rail business. So the student market is actually not quite as peak centric. It is more of a midday and often an evening service after classes. So we can't have a traditional peak service. We need to look at those demand profiles, especially at a stop level, so we avoid crowding. I think overall we're just early stages. I mean, COVID hit and we had these tools in place, and it's really learning what are the new questions that people are asking. And I don't think we have all the answers yet, but we're certainly have the tools to start investigating.
Yeah, and indeed, additional insight required.
Yeah, and daily we get different questions, and it's more being flexible and agile so that, you know, if someone asks us about Yorkdale Terminal, we know the answer within a few minutes instead of going back to the raw data and starting to pull. You know, a few years ago, we didn't have APC data. It started only 3 years ago. So if this was back in 2015, this would have required manual counts and people traveling around the region looking at customer behavior. So just thinking about efficiencies, there's definitely an investment in the server and all the technology, but I think it's paying off now.
In making great arguments for more service. Thank you very much, I hope. Right. I'm leafing through here. We did have one question in chat about making APC automated passenger counter Tableau reports available. Would somebody like to address that question?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Who has something to say about sharing their APC Tableau reports?
I assume it might be directly the dashboard that I showed.
Mm-hmm.
I basically Metrolinx has an open data program, which we've recently started. However, data like this are not currently on the kind of green light list. They're under review at this time. So unfortunately, it's kind of early days. We've started with the ridership at the rail stations, but we're certainly working, and I'm pushing. It essentially gets approved by senior management, and so we're phase 2 rollout. I'm pushing to have these data included, but I can't guarantee that at this point.
If I may say, for the STL, we've recently actually deployed a new tool on our website, and it's publicly available. And what it shows is the expected level of crowdedness on our buses for every. So basically, if you're a user, you can just go to our website, choose the bus route that you're going to use, the beginning stop, and then the end destination stop, and it will tell you like how many people are you going to have on your bus probably, and during what time. So for example, it can tell you that for about 10 minutes you will have 10 to 20 people on board, and for the rest of your trip, for example, another 5 minutes, it will be really empty, so less than 5 people. And then you can judge and decide for yourself whether you should maybe pick a different schedule, if you can switch to a less crowded option, or if you're at ease with this information. So that's something that we've released this summer to help our customers navigate in this particular context.
I hope we've had that question adequately answered to whoever was asking that question. Thank you very much. Questions disappear. How interesting. I have a bit of a question for everybody, and I wonder, these presentations were submitted, the conference was envisioned, the presentations were submitted before the pandemic hit. And somebody say, how many people, how would you have altered your presentation? What insights is your data giving you, and what would be the insight you would share if you had made your plans for your presentation in June instead of in February, March? Anybody?
Well, I think as we analyze data, well, most of you do analyze data. We see very regular patterns all the time. It's the same. We see very regular patterns over the years. And COVID hits, and then it was like everything changed. There was no patterns, no more patterns. Everyone changed their behavior. So it was a very interesting opportunity, and it is now to better understand how users are changing because of this, and how we are reacting, and how can we improve the system.
Excellent. Anybody else?
If we had to use data collected during COVID-19 pandemic, it would have been very problematic because we had a lot of closures here in Israel.
Mm-hmm.
So it would show that no bus lanes are needed because there's no buses on the road.
Nobody on the road. A very different time.
But ironically, it's the best time to put them in because you won't get the opposition that you would if there's lots of traffic congestion.
Actually, if you remove all the cars from the road, you got bus lanes everywhere.
Express bus.
Yeah, in the short term, they're great. You don't need them, but.
So for me, actually, if there was no COVID, we would have been much further along in this project that I've been talking about, because we had to really refocus our attention on understanding what's happening with our day-to-day ridership. So that's one change. And the other one is that we actually had to stop smart card transactions to protect the bus drivers. So there was no front door boarding. It was all rear door boarding. So for this couple of months, from mid-March to right about now, we don't have that many smart card transactions actually in our database. So we will have to find a way to go around this limitation in our further analysis. So we're only just starting to thinking about how to deal with all this impacts.
So disruption to travel behavior, and then a disruption as well to the data that you got for even gaining insight into it.
That was a huge one, yes.
Okay. We're doing really well here. I wondered if it's a great pleasure at Transit Data 2020 to see so many practitioners participating. And I wonder if you would say just a word about how you envision your role growing over the years. My guess you come to this with great expertise in data analysis and use of data for answering questions. And what opportunities do you see, and how do you see these opportunities growing? What would hold you back?
I might just speak briefly about the way I think Metrolinx is transforming the way we use data. And in the last mostly in the last year, we've launched our Enterprise Data Governance program, which is really a way of unifying a lot of diverse work being done in, for example, operations, planning, and marketing traditionally have been quite separate. But there's a great need for us all to have a shared data lake, and we've invested in some infrastructure to set up a Hadoop server, so we can now put a lot of this information in a common place and set up dashboards. We're shifting to Power BI as a platform to have these tools available across the enterprise. So having people dedicated to enterprise data governance and setting up those structures has really enabled what I think is kind of the next generation of insights. So that's the big one. And then obviously, just as we plan and build for new subway LRT projects and massive GO rail expansion in the area, we've really had to up our game in terms of data, especially in the GIS or geographic server. We have a new enterprise data governance that also governs the geospatial data. We have an Esri portal, and that's a whole other world. So we've put these platforms in place, and I think it's a really exciting shift in the way we do our work.
Very interesting, and then that's a lot of powerful computing and visualization and analysis in terms of platform, right? Are other people feeling from agencies feeling that well? What have you been doing?
May I add in? Yeah, especially because of COVID, we had a very surge in making data available faster. And what before we had processing like monthly or yearly, stuff like crowding, even crowding, we had to process it daily. We had to process crowding daily for all routes, all segments, and to check how it was moving, because every day we had a different decision from stakeholders, from the municipality, and we had to know what is happening because of that decision. And the data started to be analyzed much more faster than before. So I think it improved a lot.
And the great need to be responsive to this showed the value of the data you had and that you could use it to be responsive.
Yeah, and now they are paying more attention, and it's much more important now because we can answer things much quicker and make decisions be data-driven.
Excellent. Anybody else say next steps, directions you can be taken, the impetus that this emergency gave to the work you do?
I just want to comment about data-driven decision-making and data-driven displays. I'm not a practitioner in an agency, but I do see a lot of dashboards, and during my research, I saw a lot of data visualization in the realm of public transit. And I think that one of the most important things data analysts in this realm can do is to improve their data visualization skills. Because there's a lot of information, there's a lot of data, but we do see a lot of poor data visualizations. Some defaults from the different programs or things that people just don't understand that should not be used for transmitting or presenting data-driven dashboards. So I would take that into consideration.
And that's perhaps a really great point, that some of the things that can be lessons learned and shared among practitioners is good ways of presenting data that people commonly want to see.
If I may add,
can I add one little point on that? I think it's also very important. I completely agree. Accurate data visualization is important, but the measure we chose, the passenger kilometers divided by revenue service hours, that was a specific decision because we're a regional operator and have some routes that operate on highways, others are local roads. So speed of travel on different routes is quite diverse. Whereas a local operator that's more traditionally on local roads would probably use passenger kilometers divided by service kilometers instead of service hours. And that nuance is important because depending on what type of service you operate, you need a performance measure that's reflects the outcomes you're trying to achieve. So just to put that out there, if you're interested in that metric, send me an email. I'd love to chat more.
Anna, you had something?
Oh yeah, I just wanted to add that we've been really lucky at STL because our leadership, they've understood early on the importance of innovation, and actually it's part of our mission right now. It's official in the organization's mission. And actually last year we've created a team that specializes in big data analysis. So I could completely relate to what Anthony said there, that we were lucky that all these systems were already in place for this kind of crisis moment, because now we could just go and analyze on the fly and have the data from the previous day immediately to answer a lot of questions that we've been receiving from all sorts of decision makers. So we don't have a shortage of people to work on this data. We don't have a shortage of data. We don't have a shortage of ideas. So the way to move forward is to just find the time to do all these projects, basically.
We have the problems, we have the data, we have the talent. I think there'll be great strides made over the next year, and Transit Data 2020 has been a great showcase for presenting some of these results and sharing in your peer community so that people can take things away and bring things back too. I want to thank our presenters very much for sharing the insights from their work. I want to thank also our attendees. We had an audience of about 75 people listening in, for posting questions and making this at the end a highly interactive session with lots of additional information shared through the Q&As. Thank you very much for contributing to that. I hope I know you're going to enjoy the rest of Transit Data 2020 and all the interesting activities that have been lined up by the organizers, the information that will be shared by your peers, make some new colleagues, make some new friends. Don't we wish we were able to entertain you in Toronto and show you the sites and have you all really engage. But if we can't do that, we're delighted to engage with you this way and meet you on Zoom. Enjoy the rest of the day, the rest of the sessions. I look forward to them myself. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just great. Thank you very much.